At my own baby shower they made me wear a maid's uniform. It suits you, his sister laughed as I poured tea and clicked their photos. I smiled, played along and waited quietly for the envelope to arrive. They thought they were mocking me. They had no idea what I was holding back. I was 8 months pregnant. My feet swollen, my back aching. I should have been resting, but I was setting up chairs for my own baby shower. The morning had started like most others, Cole promising he'd be there to help with preparations. I'd watched him knot his tie in front of the bathroom mirror, his reflection avoiding my gaze when I reminded him about today's importance. "I'll be home by noon, plenty of time," he'd assured me, kissing my forehead like an afterthought. "The Robertson account needs finalizing." The door had closed behind him before I could respond. The hollow echo of his departure felt symbolic, a preview of the day ahead. By 2 o'clock the text came. Caught up with work. Start without me. Sorry, asterisk. So there I was, arranging delicate china teacups with swollen fingers, my lower back screaming in protest as I bent to place name cards at each setting. The baby kicked insistently as if objecting to the exertion. Our first child, and already she seemed more aware than her father of what mattered. The caterers had arrived late. 40 minutes of standing in the doorway scanning the street while mentally recalculating the timeline. Once they finally swept in, they proceeded to rearrange everything I'd spent the morning perfecting. I didn't object. What was the point? This day had never really been about me. The first guests began arriving at 3. Cole's Aunt Marianne offering a lukewarm hug and immediately asking where the restroom was. She didn't comment on the decorations or the spread. She didn't ask how I was feeling. "Cole's not here yet," she'd remarked, not bothering to hide her disappointment. The doorbell rang again. More of Cole's family filtered in. Second cousins I'd met only once at our wedding, his former college roommate and wife who lived across town but never returned our dinner invitations. Their gifts were placed on the designated table, their eyes scanning the room, seeking the person they'd actually come to see. By 3:30, the living room hummed with conversation, none of it directed at me. I refilled water glasses and directed newcomers to the food table. My pink maternity dress, chosen carefully for the occasion, ordered weeks in advance, seemed to render me invisible as I moved between clusters of his relatives. Then Isabel arrived. Cole's sister had a gift for entrances. Conversation paused as she swept in, designer handbag dangling from her wrist, oversized sunglasses perched on her head despite the cloudy day. She air-kissed me, leaving a phantom impression of Chanel perfume and contempt. "The guest of honor," she trilled loud enough to draw all eyes. In her hand was a gift bag, not wrapped in the baby blue or soft pink paper of the other presents, but in stark black with silver tissue spilling from the top. "You'll love it," she smirked, pressing it into my hands. "Open it now." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. We'd never gotten along, Isabel and I. From the moment Cole had introduced us 3 years ago, she'd made it clear I wasn't what she'd envisioned for her brother. Too ordinary. Too practical. Everything she wasn't. With 20 pairs of eyes on me, I reached into the bag. My fingers closed around fabric, synthetic and stiff. I pulled it out slowly, the black and white material unfurling like a flag of surrender. A maid's uniform, complete with frilly apron and headpiece. The room went silent for one merciful moment before Isabel broke it. "It's just a laugh," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Her eyes glittered with malice disguised as humor. "You're always so domestic." Someone, Cole's cousin Rachel I think, added from across the room, "It suits her. She's always cleaning up after us anyway." Polite titters rippled through the gathering. I didn't flinch. Didn't allow my face to betray the humiliation crawling up my throat like bile. That I smiled. A practiced, perfect smile that never reached my eyes. "How thoughtful," I said, my voice steady. "Should I try it on?" Isabel's momentary surprise was worth the words I'd forced past my lips. She'd expected tears perhaps. Or awkward embarrassment. Not compliance. "Well, that would be fun, wouldn't it?" She recovered quickly, looking around for support. Nods and murmurs of agreement followed. I excused myself and took the uniform into the bathroom. Locked the door. Stared at my reflection in the mirror. Cheeks flushed, eyes too bright. My hands trembled as I unbuttoned my carefully chosen dress, my stomach twisting with an emotion deeper than anger. The uniform was slightly too small, of course. The zipper strained across my pregnant belly. The hem rode up above my knees. I looked ridiculous, a caricature of servitude and impending motherhood combined. The baby kicked again, harder this time. "I know," I whispered, placing my palm against the taut skin. "This isn't who we are." When I emerged, there was a collective intake of breath, followed by laughter. Someone took a picture, the flash momentarily blinding me. Cole's mother pressed her lips together in what might have been disapproval, but she said nothing. "You're such a good sport," they cooed, raising wine glasses while I poured tea into their cups. I moved among them in that demeaning costume, taking their photographs when asked, cutting the cake they didn't help serve, collecting discarded napkins and empty plates. No one offered help. Not a single person stood to assist the 8 months pregnant woman in a mockery of a uniform. Not Cole, who'd finally arrived halfway through, offering vague apologies and accepting a beer from his father. Not his mother, who'd raised 4 children but couldn't seem to remember the discomfort of late pregnancy. Certainly not Isabel, who watched it all with thinly veiled satisfaction. My baby kicked relentlessly now, as if to say, "You don't belong here." As if she already understood what had taken me too long to see. But I stayed calm, serene even, because beneath the humiliation was a strange sense of clarity. A confirmation of what I'd suspected for months, that to them I was and would always be an outsider. Useful but not valued. Present but not seen. They thought today was the punchline of a long-running joke at my expense. They had no idea. A courier was scheduled to arrive the next day with a packet of documents they'd never expect. The carefully orchestrated result of months of quiet work, of listening when they thought I wasn't, of leveraging what they'd overlooked. Let them laugh today. Let them enjoy their little power play. I was the one writing the final punchline. And tomorrow the joke wouldn't be on me. The last guest left just after 7, carrying a monogrammed favor bag I'd assembled at dawn. I closed the door behind them, leaning against it for a moment, still wearing that ridiculous uniform. The silence felt like a blessing after hours of forced smiles and strategic invisibility. I should have changed immediately. Should have torn off the costume and reclaimed my dignity. But exhaustion had settled into my bones, and the baby was restless, pressing against my ribs as if searching for space in a world that hadn't made room for either of us. Through the hallway, I could hear them still lounging in the living room. Isabel, Cole's mother Patricia, his cousin Rachel, and 2 of his aunts. They'd stayed behind, ostensibly to help clean up, though not one of them had lifted a finger. Cole was with them, his laughter occasionally rising above their chatter. I began collecting dessert plates from the dining room, stacking them quietly, my body on autopilot. They didn't realize I was still here, just one room away, the open archway between dining room and hallway carrying their voices to me with perfect clarity. She really wore it. Isabel's voice held that familiar note of superiority. The whole time. She doesn't even realize she is the help. I froze, plate suspended mid-air. Cole's stuck now, Patricia sighed, ice cubes clinking in what I knew would be her 3rd gin and tonic. Well, at least the kid will be cute. Those cheekbones of hers might compensate for everything else. My hand trembled slightly, but I didn't move. Didn't breathe. "She's lucky to be here at all," Rachel added. "I mean, where was she before? Some accounting firm in the suburbs? Now she's married into the Rowe family, living in that house, access to the club. It's like winning the lottery without buying a ticket." They laughed, the sound crawling up my spine like insects. "Did you see her mother at the wedding?" One of the aunts chimed in. "That polyester pantsuit. I thought Patricia would faint." More laughter. A beat of silence that begged for intervention. For my husband to speak up, to defend me, to defend his child's grandmother. "Cole, darling, you need another beer?" His mother's voice again. "Sure." One word. That's all he offered. I gripped the plate so tight I thought it might shatter in my hands. The fine bone china, a wedding gift from Patricia, remained intact, though something else inside me cracked open. Not one word of thanks for the gifts I bought them. Silver frames engraved with their names, cashmere scarves I couldn't really afford. Nothing about the food I'd paid for, the decorations I'd hung myself while balancing on a step stool, 8 months pregnant with their grandchild, niece, cousin. And Cole? He said nothing. Just the occasional sound of his thumbs scrolling through his phone, the subtle click of keys as he texted someone who wasn't in this room. I gathered my courage and what was left of my composure, then entered the living room with the stack of plates. Their conversation died instantly, eyes flicking toward me without recognition, then away without acknowledgement. I began collecting empty glasses, moving around the periphery of their circle. No one looked up. No one paused their new conversation about summer vacation plans to ask if I needed help. I was furniture to them, useful but unremarkable. But I watched their faces. Saw exactly who they were without the masks they wore for public consumption. Witnessed the silent exchanges between mother and son, the satisfied curl of Isabel's lip when I bent awkwardly to retrieve a napkin from the floor. Somehow that moment of invisibility granted me a clarity I'd been missing. They had shown me who they truly were not just today but for the 3 years since I'd met Cole. The subtle diminishments. The inside jokes. The way conversations shifted when I entered rooms. I'd spent so long trying to belong, convinced that if I just tried harder, smiled more readily, served more faithfully, they would eventually accept me. What a waste of energy that had been. "We should get going," Patricia finally announced, rising unsteadily. "It's been a long day." It had been. But not in the way she meant. I smiled and thanked them for coming. Helped Patricia find her purse. Endured Isabel's condescending pat on my belly and whispered, "Get some rest, you look exhausted," in my ear. The door closed behind them at last. Cole mumbled something about taking a shower and disappeared upstairs, leaving me alone with the debris of the day, crumpled napkins, half-eaten cake, the evidence of my humiliation strewn across our home. I changed out of the uniform at last, folding it neatly and placing it on my dresser. Not to discard but to keep. A reminder of this day. Of what they thought of me. Of what I would never allow myself to become. That night, while Cole slept soundly beside me, his breathing deep and untroubled, I slipped out of bed and padded to my home office. The soft glow of my laptop illuminated the darkness as I pulled up the legal documents again. The silent transaction I'd made months ago. The one Cole had been too busy to review when I'd mentioned it casually. His family's export company had needed additional funding for an expansion into new markets. A cash infusion to secure a major contract that would triple their footprint in Southeast Asia. I had money, not from winning some metaphorical lottery as Rachel had suggested, but from years of careful saving and a modest inheritance from my grandmother. When Cole mentioned the company's cash flow issues at dinner one night, I'd offered a solution. "Let me help," I'd said. "Consider it an investment in our future." He'd kissed my cheek absently. "That's sweet, but it's complicated business stuff. Dad will figure it out." But I knew before he did that his father wouldn't figure it out. The company's books had been mismanaged for years, something I'd noticed when Cole had asked me to look over some tax documents the previous spring. My accounting background may have been from some firm in the suburbs, but numbers told clear stories to those who knew how to read them. I made a call to James Werner, an old colleague who'd moved into corporate law. Outlined what I wanted to do. What I needed in return. I didn't ask for credit. Just control. A percentage signed over quietly, hidden among routine paperwork. Legitimate, binding, and completely unexpected. They didn't read it carefully. Why would they? The documents came from their own legal team with just one additional page inserted among the standard clauses. A page that transferred 30% ownership directly to me, with options for more based on future performance metrics. After all, to them I was just Vanessa, the maid in the family photo. The wallpaper in their perfect family portrait. The woman who served tea in a costume for their amusement. I closed the laptop, the blue light fading to darkness. Tomorrow the courier would arrive with confirmation of everything I'd set in motion. Tomorrow they would begin to understand what I'd always known. I wasn't just part of their family. I was about to become part of their legacy. Morning arrived with a text message from Patricia. Casual lunch at our house, 1 p.m. To celebrate yesterday's lovely shower. Nothing fancy. I stared at my phone screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard. The implicit command masquerading as an invitation was typical. No consideration for my schedule, my comfort, or the fact that I'd been on my feet for hours the day before. Cole emerged from the bathroom, towel wrapped around his waist. "Mom invited us for lunch," he said, not a question. "I know. She texted me." He nodded as if that settled everything. "We should be there by 1. I placed my phone on the nightstand. "I have some errands to run first. I'll meet you there." A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Can't you do them later? Mom likes when we arrive together." "I'll be there," I replied, voice calm, giving away nothing of what stirred beneath. Just a bit late. He didn't press further. Didn't ask about my errands or offer to accompany me. Just shrugged and turned to his closet, the conversation already forgotten. I dressed carefully that morning. Not in the designer labels Isabel favored or the country club casual Patricia preferred, but in something deliberately understated. A soft cream blouse, tailored gray slacks and simple flats. I applied neutral makeup, pulled my hair back into a low ponytail. Nothing flashy. Just composed. The courier arrived precisely at 10 as arranged. The young woman in the crisp uniform handed me the padded envelope with a smile and wished me a good day. She had no idea what the envelope contained, no concept of how it would reshape an entire family dynamic within hours. I signed for it, checking the contents one last time before sealing it again. Everything was in order. The ownership documents, the transfer agreements, the board position appointments. All legal, all binding, all irreversible. I tucked the envelope into my handbag and headed out, not to Patricia and Richard's home, but to the small patisserie downtown where I'd ordered a special cake. Another gift, though not one they'd expect or appreciate. The shop owner greeted me warmly, bringing out the simple chocolate torte I'd requested. No baby-themed decorations, no cutesy messaging. Just elegant dark chocolate with a single gold leaf garnish. Special occasion? She asked as she boxed it carefully. You could say that, I replied. A change of management. By the time I pulled into the circular driveway of the Rowe family estate, it was nearly 2. Cars lined the approach. More than just family, I noted. Friends, business associates, the inner circle that gathered for these impromptu displays of affluence and connection. I took a deep breath before exiting my car, centering myself. The baby kicked, a reassuring pressure against my ribs. Ready? I whispered, resting my hand on my belly. The answering flutter felt like affirmation. Approaching the grand entrance with cake box in one hand and purse in the other, I rang the bell instead of using my key. A subtle declaration that I was no longer simply walking into their domain on their terms. The housekeeper answered, surprise flickering across her face. Mrs. Rowe. They're all in the garden. Should I take the cake? No thank you, Maria. I'll bring it through. I moved through the house I'd visited hundreds of times in the 3 years since meeting Cole, past the formal dining room where I'd endured countless stilted family dinners, through the sunroom where Isabel had once accidentally spilled red wine on my white dress just before family photos. Voices and laughter drifted in from the flagstone patio. Through the French doors, I could see them all lounging in the spring sunshine, Isabel holding court in a flowing sundress, Patricia refilling wine glasses, Cole engaged in conversation with his father and 2 men I recognized as board members of Rowe Exports. I paused, observing them unnoticed for a moment. They looked so comfortable in their entitlement, so secure in their positions. That would change in approximately 10 minutes. The sealed envelope was already on the gift table by the patio doors, placed there earlier by Maria at my request. Neatly labeled with the Rowe Exports logo and the word confidential, in discreet lettering. I pushed open the door. The conversation didn't immediately stop this time. A few heads turned, casual acknowledgments, nothing more. I set the cake box on the refreshment table and moved toward Cole, who offered a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. You missed the appetizers, he murmured as if this were my greatest concern. I brought dessert, I replied, gesturing toward the box. Isabel approached, champagne flute in hand. Vanessa, finally. We were beginning to think you were too tired from all that serving yesterday. She laughed, glancing around to ensure her audience appreciated the reference. I smiled. Not at all. I had important business to attend to. Business? She raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. How mysterious. Patricia joined us, martini in hand despite the early hour. Darling, you look exhausted. Sit down before you fall down. She gestured vaguely toward an empty chair at the edge of the gathering. Actually, I said, I brought something I think everyone should see first. I moved toward the gift table, aware of eyes tracking my movement. Isabel followed, curiosity piqued. Another gift. Vanessa, you're too much. She reached for the envelope, laughing. Vanessa's probably written us another thank you note. She's always so proper. I remained silent as she broke the seal and extracted the documents, her expression shifting from amusement to confusion. She flipped through the pages, brow furrowing. This isn't a card, she said, voice faltering. It's legal documents? The change in her tone drew attention. Cole walked over, extending his hand. Let me see that. He took the papers, scanning them with increasing disbelief. His eyes widened, jaw tightening. This says Vanessa has controlling interest in Roe Exports now. The buzz of conversation died. Everyone turned to me. I nodded, meeting their stares with calm certainty. Yes. When the company needed funding last year, I used part of my inheritance to cover the shipment gap. In return, I asked for equity. It was signed. Notarized. Richard Roe, Cole's father, pushed to his feet, face flushing. You. I followed the rules, I said, cutting him off. And your lawyer. He approved it all. The silence that followed was exquisite, thick with shock and dawning comprehension. Patricia's martini glass trembled slightly in her grip. One of the board members began flipping frantically through the document pages. Isabel looked like she might be sick, her carefully maintained composure cracking. This can't be legal. Cole, tell her this isn't legal. But Cole said nothing, staring at me like he'd never really seen me before. He hadn't. The timing of this announcement isn't coincidental, I continued, my voice steady. After yesterday, I thought it appropriate to clarify my position. I gestured toward the refreshment table. I brought cake. Chocolate, not vanilla. Change can be bitter at first, but I find it has more depth. Patricia found her voice at last. You planned this all along. Used Cole to get to the company. I laughed softly. No, Patricia. I married Cole because I loved him. This came later, when I realized what his family thought of me. I placed my hand protectively over my belly. What they might someday think of my child. We can challenge this, Richard began. You can try, I conceded. But your lawyer, your family friend for 30 years, helped draft these documents. He explained the situation to me quite clearly when I approached him. The company was overextended, the Malaysian contract would fall through without immediate capital, and the banks had declined further credit. I provided the solution no one else could. I moved to the cake box, opening it with deliberate care. So yes, I'll continue serving. I lifted the cake, carried it to the center table. From the head of the table. Cole stared at me, something unreadable shifting in his expression. Not quite anger, not quite respect. Confusion, perhaps, at discovering the woman he'd married wasn't who he'd thought she was. But then he wasn't who I'd thought he was either. They all watched in stunned silence as I cut the first slice of cake and placed it on a plate. Who would like to be served first? I asked. They all thought I was playing dress-up. But I'd come dressed for business. No one touched the cake that day. They dispersed like scattered birds, mumbling excuses about prior engagements and early mornings ahead. I ate a single slice alone at the patio table, savoring each bite while Patricia instructed Maria to wrap the rest for later. It was never served again. The drive home with Cole was silent, a vacuum of unspoken accusations filling the space between us. He gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles blanched white, jaw working as if chewing through responses and discarding them one by one. Were you ever going to tell me? He finally asked as we pulled into our driveway. I considered the question. Would you have listened if I had? He had no answer for that. Within days, the tone changed at Roe Exports. The corner office that had belonged to Richard for 30 years now held a nameplate reading Vanessa Roe, Executive Director. The title had been my lawyer's suggestion. Less antagonistic than so he'd advised, but clear in its authority. Meetings started without Cole, who found himself increasingly sidelined. Not by my directive but by his own retreat. He'd begun arriving late, leaving early, contributing little when present. His colleagues responded accordingly. I had full access to all financials, shipment records, vendor logs, the complete anatomy of a company that had been mismanaged for years despite its potential. The numbers told a story of nepotism, outdated practices, and missed opportunities. Most revealing were the marketing expenditures under Isabel's supervision. Her creative campaigns were bleeding money, lavish product launches at exclusive resorts, influencer partnerships with minimal returns, vanity projects thinly disguised as brand development. I called for a comprehensive review of the marketing department. The department heads shifted uncomfortably in their chairs as I walked them through spreadsheets projected on the conference room wall. These 4 campaigns, I indicated the highlighted rows, represent 30% of our annual marketing budget with a return of less than 5%. Isabel's face flushed dark beneath her perfect makeup. Those are relationship-building investments, she insisted. You can't measure everything in immediate returns. Actually, I replied, sliding a document across the table, we can and should. This is a revised budget proposal. I'll need implementation plans by Friday. She snatched the papers, scanning them with narrowing eyes. This is ridiculous. You're cutting my departmental budget by 40%. I'm reallocating resources to areas with demonstrated returns, I corrected. The Digital Expansion Initiative and the Asia-Pacific Trade Show presence will receive the difference. This is sabotage, she hissed, throwing the proposal down. You're deliberately undermining my work. The room fell silent, all eyes shifting between us. This isn't personal, Isabel. My tone remained even. It's business. She pushed back her chair, standing abruptly. You're not a businesswoman, she spat. You're a glorified accountant who manipulated her way into power. I didn't rise, didn't match her volume or emotion. No, I said, meeting her gaze steadily. I'm your boss. The words hung in the air between us, simple and irrefutable. I didn't fire Isabel that day. I didn't fire anyone during those first crucial weeks. I didn't need to. Instead, I simply tightened the reins that had been dangling loose for too long. Cut unnecessary expenses. Implemented reporting structures. Reassigned roles based on performance metrics, not bloodlines or friendship histories. Required justification for expenditures that had previously been rubber-stamped. Basic business practices, all of them. The kind that any competent executive would have implemented years ago. The marketing team adapted quickly once Isabel's tantrums lost their effect. The logistics department streamlined their processes without Richard's micromanagement. The sales team exceeded their quarterly targets for the first time in 3 years once freed from Cole's inconsistent leadership. At home, the changes were equally dramatic. Cole came in late that Friday, the end of my first full week as executive director. I was reviewing contracts at the kitchen table, my laptop surrounded by stacks of paper and a half-eaten plate of pasta. You're turning my family against me, he declared without preamble, dropping his keys onto the counter with a clatter. I looked up, genuinely surprised. How so? Dad barely speaks to me now. Mom keeps asking what I let happen. Isabel says you're systematically pushing me out. I closed my laptop. And what do you think, Cole? He ran a hand through his hair, frustration etching lines around his mouth. I think you blindsided me. Made me look like a fool. I didn't have to, I said quietly. They did it to themselves. They've been undermining you for years, treating you as an extension of your father rather than a leader in your own right. You just never noticed because they did the same to me, and that seemed normal to you. Something shifted in his expression. A flicker of recognition quickly submerged beneath resentment. He turned away, grabbed a whiskey bottle from the cabinet. This isn't what I signed up for, he muttered. Neither was serving tea in a maid's costume at my baby shower, I replied. He didn't sleep in our room after that conversation. Claimed the guest bedroom needed breaking in before the baby comes. A transparent excuse we both pretended to believe. I saw him less and less as my pregnancy advanced and my role at the company solidified. He took business trips that hadn't been necessary before, scheduled golf games with clients who didn't exist, worked late on projects that never seemed to materialize in company records. I didn't confront him. Didn't track his movements or question his absences. I focused on work, on my health, on preparing for the baby whose movements grew stronger each day. The company began to thrive under new management. The Malaysian contract that had precipitated my investment was fulfilled ahead of schedule, opening doors to neighboring markets. Q3 projections exceeded expectations by 17%. The board meeting that had once been Richard's monthly monologue became a collaborative discussion of strategic initiatives. Most surprising was the way the team responded to my leadership. They brought me problems I could solve, ideas I could develop, innovations I could implement. They respected the clarity of my vision and the consistency of my expectations. Where Richard had demanded loyalty, I earned it. The whispers about me at family gatherings gradually faded, replaced by awkward acknowledgments of the company's improving fortunes. Patricia stopped making pointed comments about temporary arrangements, when quarterly reports showed record profits. Richard's initial hostility gave way to grudging consultation requests. Even Isabel's marketing department began producing measurable results once properly resourced and directed. Because I wasn't showing off. I wasn't flexing power for its own sake or demanding recognition. I was showing results. Implementing systems that worked. Making decisions based on data rather than dynamics. The same woman they had laughed at in a maid's uniform was now the one signing off on their paychecks, approving their budgets, evaluating their performance. And I didn't raise my voice once. Didn't need dramatic confrontations or public humiliations to establish my authority. I simply stopped asking for respect and took my seat at the head of the table. The contractions began during a quarterly review meeting. A sudden tightening that made me pause mid-sentence, hand instinctively moving to my belly. I recovered quickly, continuing my assessment of the international shipping projections while the sensation ebbed. But 20 minutes later, when it returned with greater intensity, I knew. "Are you all right?" Richard asked, noticing my sharp intake of breath. A note of genuine concern in his voice, the first I'd heard directed toward me in all our years of knowing each other. "I think my labor has started," I replied, keeping my voice measured despite the wave of discomfort. "Let's adjourn for today. Martin, can you distribute the updated forecast models by email?" The room erupted in a flurry of movement and exclamations. Someone offered to call an ambulance. Another suggested carrying me to a car. I declined both, walking steadily to my office to collect my hospital bag. Packed weeks ago, always ready. My assistant Claire insisted on driving me. "I'll call Cole," she said, helping me into her car. I nodded, breathing through another contraction. "Tell him to meet us at Memorial Hospital. Dr. Winters is my obstetrician." Cole didn't answer her first 3 calls. When he finally picked up, I could hear his voice through the speaker, distorted but dismissive. "I'm in the middle of something. Can it wait?" "Your wife is in labor," Claire replied bluntly. "Pause. Right now. But she's not due for another week." "Babies don't follow schedules," I remarked dryly between breaths. "I'm stuck at this client meeting in Westport," he said. "I can't just leave. I'll be there as soon as I can, okay?" The call ended before I could respond. Claire glanced at me, concern and indignation warring on her face. "Should I call someone else for you? Your mother, maybe?" I shook my head. My mother lived 3 states away, battling her own health issues. We'd agreed months ago that she wouldn't try to make it for the birth. "I'll be fine on my own." The contractions intensified as we arrived at the hospital. By the time I was settled in the delivery room, they were coming every 4 minutes. The nurses moved efficiently around me, checking monitors, adjusting equipment, offering encouragement. My phone buzzed on the side table. Isabel's name appeared on the screen with a text. "Let us know when she's here." I didn't reply. Didn't have the energy or inclination to engage with performative interest now. Instead, I surrendered to the rhythm of my body, the ancient knowledge awakening in my cells. Time compressed and expanded. The pain reached crescendos I hadn't imagined possible, then receded enough to let me gather strength for the next wave. The medical team guided me with calm professionalism, their voices anchoring me when I felt adrift in sensation. "You're doing beautifully," my doctor assured me. "The baby's heart rate is perfect. You're almost there." No one held my hand. No one mopped my brow or whispered words of comfort in my ear. But in that absence, I found a strange kind of peace. A recognition that I was doing this on my own terms without pretense or obligation. Just as I'd been running the company. Just as I'd been preparing for motherhood. At 8:17 p.m., after 6 hours of labor, my daughter arrived in a rush of release and relief. The sound of her first cry pierced me deeper than any pain had, reorganizing my cells, realigning my priorities in an instant. "Here she is," the doctor announced, placing her on my chest. A beautiful, healthy girl. She was wet and warm against my skin, her tiny body vibrating with the force of her cries. Then she opened her eyes and the room fell away. Dark blue, almost black in the dim light, they locked onto mine with startling clarity. She quieted immediately, a look of intense concentration on her perfect face. She was quiet, strong, alert, just as I had hoped. Just as I needed her to be in this world that wouldn't always welcome her. I held her close, counting fingers and toes, memorizing the curve of her ear, the bow of her lips. "You'll never serve people who don't see your worth," I whispered against her downy head. "You'll never diminish yourself to fit their expectations." The nurses took her briefly to complete their assessments, then returned her wrapped in a soft blanket. We were moved to a recovery room as evening deepened into night. Still no Cole. My phone accumulated messages. Isabel again, Patricia wondering if they should come to the hospital, co-workers offering congratulations. I responded only to Claire, reassuring her that both baby and I were doing well. It was nearly midnight when Cole finally arrived, still in his business suit, a hastily purchased bouquet of roses clutched in his hand. His tie was loosened, hair disheveled as if he'd been running his fingers through it repeatedly. "I'm sorry," he said, hovering in the doorway. "The meeting ran long and then traffic was a nightmare." I nodded, too exhausted for confrontation, too overflowing with new love to make space for old disappointments. He approached the bassinet beside my bed, peering down at our sleeping daughter. "She's beautiful," he said, voice softening with genuine awe. "You did great." I let him hold her when he asked, watching as he awkwardly cradled her against his chest. His eyes filled with tears that surprised us both. "What should we name her?" he asked. "Eleanor," I replied. The name I'd chosen months ago but never shared. "It means bright, shining one." He nodded, studying her face. "Eleanor Rowe. It's perfect." I didn't correct him, didn't add the middle name, Grace, my grandmother's name, that would appear on her birth certificate. I didn't look at him as he gently rocked our daughter, didn't acknowledge the sudden tenderness that seemed to transform him. Because it was too late for such transformations. Too late for the partnership we might have shared, the family we might have been. The night nurse came in with a clipboard. "I need your visitor list," she explained. "Who's allowed to see mom and baby?" I provided her with 3 names. Claire, my friend Jenna, my cousin Michael. "What about family?" she asked. "I understand baby's grandmother and aunt are in the waiting room." I stilled. "They're here? Now?" Cole nodded. "I called them on my way over." "They can't come in," I said firmly. "No Isabel. No Cole's mother. No extended family." The nurse glanced between us, sensing the tension. "But they're waiting outside," she said. "They've been here for hours." "They can wait forever," I replied, my voice quiet but resolute. "I don't want them here." Cole's expression hardened. "Vanessa, that's not fair. They just want to meet their granddaughter, their niece." I wasn't being cruel. I was being clear. They didn't celebrate my pregnancy, they mocked it. They didn't lift me when I needed support, they laughed at me. And now they don't get to witness my joy or claim connection to my daughter when it's convenient. "Our daughter," Cole corrected. "Yes," I agreed. "And as her mother, I get to decide who holds her when she's less than 6 hours old." He left without another word, presumably to deliver the news to his waiting family. I didn't ask what they said, how they reacted. For once, their opinions, their feelings, their expectations meant nothing compared to the perfect weight of Eleanor in my arms. The next morning, I sent them each a thank you card that I'd prepared weeks earlier. Inside was a photo, not of the baby they so desperately wanted to claim, but of the framed maid's uniform now hanging in my office. No message, no explanation needed. They'd understand. Message received. Eleanor turned 1 in the spring. We celebrated with a small gathering at our house. My house now, technically. No elaborate party, no designer cake, no social media spectacle. Just a sunny afternoon in the garden with people who genuinely cared about us. Cole attended, arriving exactly at the time specified on the invitation, bearing an extravagant dollhouse his mother had helped select. He played the role of devoted father for precisely 2 hours, then excused himself for a quick call that everyone understood would not be quick at all. "Vanessa," he said before leaving, pulling me aside in the kitchen. "Mom and Dad are asking when they can see Eleanor again. It's been 3 weeks." I continued slicing strawberries for the dessert platter. "They're welcome to join your regular Saturday visits anytime. You know that. But not alone. Not without me present." A note of frustration etched his voice. I set down the knife, meeting his gaze directly. "That's correct." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that once made my heart flutter, now just a familiar signal of impending complaint. "This isn't sustainable. They're her grandparents." "Yes," I agreed. And they'll treat her with respect or they won't see her. It's quite simple. Later that week I overheard Patricia at a charity function, voice pitched to Carrie across the ladies' room. Vanessa turned cold after having the baby. Postpartum does terrible things to some women. Isabel, never far from her mother's side these days, added, she uses the baby as leverage. Won't let them have a relationship with their own granddaughter unless it's on her terms. Poor Cole, sighed a third voice I didn't recognize. Trapped between his child and his family. I stepped out of the stall, watching their reflections freeze in the ornate mirror as they registered my presence. Without a word, I washed my hands, reapplied my lipstick and walked out. Their narrative was nothing new. 4 months, they'd been spinning versions of the same story. Casting me as the villain, Cole as the victim, themselves as the wronged innocents. Creating a reality where I was the outsider who'd manipulated my way into their family, then turned cruel and controlling. But the truth is simple, I woke up. I woke up to what they truly thought of me. Woke up to the dynamics I'd been tolerating. Woke up to the reality that no amount of accommodation or effort would ever make me one of them. And more importantly, that I no longer wanted to be. I no longer needed approval from people who offered only mockery disguised as inclusion. No longer measured my worth against their arbitrary standards. No longer contorted myself to fit the narrow role they'd assigned me. Instead, I built something real. Created solid policies that transformed Roe exports from a family fiefdom into a modern, competitive business. Negotiated contracts that expanded our markets across 3 continents. Implemented management systems that increased efficiency while reducing employee turnover. The company became profitable again, not marginally but substantially. The board that had once viewed me with suspicion now sought my input on long-term strategy. Industry publications that had never mentioned Roe exports began featuring our innovative approaches to supply chain management and international logistics. Most importantly, I raised a daughter who would never serve tea in a costume for laughs. Would never smile through humiliation to keep peace. Would never measure her worth through others' approval. Eleanor grew into a spirited, confident toddler with my analytical mind and Cole's easy charm. The best of both of us, but somehow entirely her own person. She approached the world with a curiosity untainted by insecurity, unfolding into herself with a certainty I envied and protected fiercely. I left Cole eventually. The end came not in a dramatic confrontation but in a series of quiet realizations that our marriage had become a hollow performance. The legal separation was finalized when Eleanor was 18 months old. The divorce 6 months after that. I don't understand, he said during our final mediation session. We could have fixed this. No, I replied. We couldn't. Because you never saw what was broken. We established a co-parenting arrangement that prioritized Eleanor's well-being over our complicated history. He saw her on weekends, took her to the zoo, read her bedtime stories about brave princesses who saved themselves. I didn't argue when he occasionally brought her to family gatherings, didn't police his time with her. Eleanor returned from these visits with stories about Grandma's big house and Auntie Belle's funny dogs, but never with the diminished spirit I'd once feared. Because she knew who she was. And more importantly, she knew she was loved, wholly, unconditionally, without expectation of performance or gratitude. Isabel's trajectory followed a different path. After a particularly disastrous quarter for her marketing department, the board, acting on my recommendation, eliminated her position entirely, redistributing her responsibilities among more qualified team members. She landed at a competing firm, though landed suggests more grace than her lateral move to a junior position actually involved. We encountered each other occasionally at industry events. Her smile tightened when she saw me, her handshake just slightly too firm. I returned both with professional courtesy, never acknowledging the history between us unless directly referenced. And people did reference it. Colleagues who'd heard rumors. New employees curious about the framed maid's uniform hanging in my office. They'd ask if the stories were true, if I'd really worn it, if I kept it as some kind of trophy. I would smile. Of course I did. Because that uniform, ridiculous as it was, represented a turning point. It hung now in my home office, positioned deliberately beside my first CEO award from the International Trade Association. Not out of spite or lingering resentment. Not as a reminder of humiliation or anger. But as a testament to transformation. They thought they stripped me of dignity that day. Thought they put me in my place, defined my worth, established the hierarchy that would govern our relationship forever. But in reality they handed me the key to everything I now possessed: clarity, purpose, resolve. The costume they meant as mockery became the catalyst for my reinvention, the moment when pretense fell away and truth emerged. All I had to do was recognize the opportunity hidden within the insult. All I had to do was stop playing a role that diminished me. All I had to do was claim the power that had always been mine. Put down the tray. And pick up the pen. The pen that signed contracts and approved budgets. The pen that drafted policies and wrote performance reviews. The pen that eventually signed divorce papers and custody agreements. The pen that wrote a new story, not just for me but for my daughter. A story where tea is served only by choice, never by obligation. Where costumes are for play, never for mockery. Where worth isn't determined by others' perceptions but by internal compass. Where the final punchline belongs to those who refuse to remain the joke. If this story of sweet revenge had you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button right now. My favorite part was when Vanessa revealed her controlling interest in the family business, turning their celebration cold with those legal documents. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. If you enjoyed Vanessa's journey from wearing a maid's uniform to taking her seat at the head of the table, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. I share new revenge stories every week where the underestimated always get the last laugh.